Alright guys, such a Kremp again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Shotzzy with some strong words for the Los Angeles Thieves. They scrimmed Thieves going into the World Championship just a little bit, OpTic Texas, and he believes that when they played them, they simply seemed rather checked out from the scrim sets that they played and believed they were just going to run it down and win the World Championship regardless. Shotzzy says that as far as he is concerned, outside looking in, Thieves got complacent going into the biggest tournaments of the year. Maybe egos took over after their success at Major 3 and Major 4. What would Nadeshot think about this situation? Is it possible that Scrappy and this Thieves team could win the World Championship again with this current roster next year? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. This, of course, is Fringe, and yesterday Zuma and Zinni were having a bit of a 1v1. Zuma came out on top. What a beautiful map. I think they've actually done a great job with it. It's pretty funny there. Like, you know, you can see Zuma tries to hop on the wall and like do a little wall run. I don't know if that's what he was trying to do, but I'm sure it'd be tempting running around this map to try and hop on the walls and bounce around because that's what you'd be used to doing on this map. But no, and yeah, honestly, the way they've done this remake here looks pretty spectacular. I do, of course, wonder, as many others do, why this map wasn't in the game already. Why did we have to wait a long time after the World Championship? Is it going to come into the map pool for the World Cup? That, I think, would be something pretty exciting to think about anyway. It does play different for sure, boots on the ground, but there are some opportunities to still bounce around the map here. You can still make some of the movement work to get into top barn window and stuff like that. So I think they've done a pretty good job making this happen. At the end of the day, this map, and I'm sure many people will feel this when they play it, especially on the boots on the ground version now, is more traditional in the sense that if you're an SMG, you can't just shell a guy top grannies and expect to win the fight, or top barn. Like, you know, back in the day, if you were an SMG player, you had the advantage of your gun was quicker. Like, you know, you had better, let's say, mechanics, better handling, and all these other things. But you didn't have the ability to just rip a guy over head a million miles away who's got an AR. And the way that this map is designed with the, you know, the layout that they have, the power positions in play, it's pretty clear that you've got to be careful as an SMG player the way you take your rounds, which I think is absolutely a good thing for CODs. I'm hoping it comes in the game. I will just quickly share these clips as well because these are just some movement things that you can still do. For those of you who rather liked Black Ops 3, kind of like myself, these were pretty common spots that you could use. Of course, when you had jetpacks, it was not an issue, but if you use your movement correctly, you can get a few of these spots still and use them in search and destroy, hardpoint, whatever you want to do. So I think the idea of going from here, you know, jumping onto this bit if you want to, and then you can use this to get into top barn potentially, then, you know, it's something to think about anyway. So just a few ideas on Fringe if you guys are playing it. I'm not 100% sure what the league is going to do when it comes to putting it in for the World Cup, whether that's even the league's decision or whether the World Cup will simply decide what maps are played. I think the pros might like to see it. Last year for the World Cup, did the pros really try very hard? The answer is no. I think Kenny made that pretty clear as well, that it was not a big thing last year, let's say the World Cup in the eyes of the pro players. This year may be a bit of a different story. So I don't know, if the pros take it super serious, they might say, oh no, let's actually not change the map pool. I'd like it to stay how it was. I think though most teams would probably be on board with switching it up a little bit. These were the numbers for the Miami Heretics. It does raise some interesting questions here, where next for these guys, because Super was revelation for these guys this season. Ever since he joined, especially in his search and destroy, they just got better and better. But Rencor was their player of the year, hands down. I think Rencor has the potential to be a real star of the future, not just this year, not just on this team. I think that's also another point. Really likable player. And just also excellent. I mean, look at the numbers. I mean, 1.25 in hardpoint, 1.23 in search, 1.21 in control, 97 overall rated. Plenty of purple on the board there as well, which is best in role in the entire tournament. And he does speak a bit of English too. So that's the thing. Could Rencor get poached? It's something to think about. You know, could FaZe get Rencor? I'm not saying that they should or would. It's definitely an out there thing to say, but it's something that at least you might contemplate. The other question is, what should Heretics do next year? Because they've had, what, 3 Sunday performances? Okay, maybe not Sundays, but in this case, they were top 4 at the tournament. Again, they had a 3rd, they had another 4th at the tournaments this season. So they did well, but, you know, not maybe well enough as they would like to have done. Still, for a Spanish team, the story is phenomenal. But I think many of us thought, given that FaZe are out, that Thieves are out, that maybe Heretics were going to make their way to the grand finals of this one. That didn't happen in the end. Now, Metals was their weakest player all year. No nobody's going to dispute that. And therefore people have said, okay, do they need to change out metals, bring in somebody else, bring in Snoopy or something? I don't know. There's been talk about Trakes as well. I think an Argentinian player that's been doing bits in challenges. Someone to think about. But also maybe this team's good. They can keep on getting better. Maybe they should stick it out. There will be questions on that. I'll just quickly mention though, on the context of the Heretics. Last year at the World Cup, Heretics were horrific. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Heretics were okay at the end of last season. They turned up to the World Cup in Riyadh, and they were like the worst team I'd ever seen in my life. I don't know what the hell they did in that preceding month, but they were just horrific. So I'm hoping that for their sake that doesn't happen again, because that would be a pretty rough spot for that organisation. But let's talk about OpTic versus Thieves. They never played each other at this tournament. It would have been great to see, but if they had played each other, I think it would have been only one-way traffic, to be honest, based on the evidence that we saw. Huke, what a performance from him. His debut LAN, June 2014, and he won champs 11 years later. That is the longest time frame ever from a LAN debut to winning champs, which makes sense, but still, it's pretty remarkable to think about, right? You look at some of these numbers, there's actually a couple of entries here for Clay, who won it in Black Ops 4 9 years and 6 months after his debut LAN, and then he won it again the following year. Kremp a pretty similar story as well. So that record was held by Kremp. It was nearly 11 years from his debut LAN events to when he won his most recent World Championship in 2020. Huke has now taken that record away from him. So remarkable to think about the longevity, because you look at Huke, you don't think of him as a veteran, but in many ways he absolutely is. And how many more years might he have left in the tank? Of course, it's got to be said, this year's World Championship was a bit different to some of the others. Just to look at this, so OpTic Texas, this event, they went 4-0 series count. We've seen that before. Thieves went 4-0 in Vanguard. OpTic went 4-0 last year. So OpTic, the last 2 years, are undefeated at the World Championship. Pretty crazy. 14-3 map count for OpTic and 82.35% overall. The record still goes to Complexity. It is interesting to look at this and see the difference between the modern day and what happened back in the day, because FaZe and Cold War had a bye in the bracket. So did Empire and MW19. They literally had to win 3 series to win champs, and they did so pretty impressively with a solid map count. But it's not the same as United going 8-0, Envy going 8-0, Complexity going 9-0 with a 24-4 map count, which is still the most impressive percentage record of all time. So just an interesting thing to look at. Pretty interesting, the minimum map win percentage was actually New York a couple of years ago. They won only 2/3 of their maps. Usually teams at least win more than that. So it's interesting to look at these runs and say, actually, a lot of these World Championship wins are pretty dominant. The teams that won were not scraping by in 5. Like, they turned up and were basically the best team there. So intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments. And that was certainly true for OpTic this tournament. They were locked in. JP was talking about it, the amount of work that they did, scrimming amateur teams in Search and Destroy to get ready for the tournament. Huke's communication, working on it massively to improve. So a couple of things on the OpTic side, but also I wanted to share what Shotzzy had to say on LA Thieves, because they were the pre-tournament favourites. They were, I think 52%-ish of people's pick'em brackets that the CDL put together. They had them winning the tournament, myself included. I had Thieves winning the tournament since the start of the season, so I thought I might as well stick with it. And especially after what happened at Major 2, when it felt like they, believed after Major 1 that, okay, we're here, it's going to be fine, next event's going to be great. Then that didn't happen, obviously. And they bombed out of Major 2 earlier than they would have expected to, getting upset by Boston in the first round. Bit of a disaster on all fronts there. But after winning Major 3, winning Major 4, it felt like they turned a bit of a corner in terms of their execution to be able to get over the line, maybe leaving ego at the door, as it were. But it feels to Shotzzy anyway, from his outside perspective looking in, that over the last month or so, when they scrimmed Thieves, which they would have done on occasion because they were on the opposite sides of the bracket, not only did they beat them 250-16, but Shotzzy says he felt like they were going through the motions. They believed, it seems, Thieves, that when they got back to LAN, their weak scrims with respect to OpTic would turn around again. I'm sure that there was a feeling, at least this is my opinion, in the Thieves camp, they were getting slammed by OpTic Online, and they're thinking, oh, well, it's OpTic Online. It'll be different when we get to LAN. We're still good. We're still good, guys. We're still good. Don't worry about it. No stress. Then they turn up to, of course, the World Championship, and it's a very different story.
For S&D last night, they're fucking trolling.
Wait, Vancouver?
Yeah. Damn, look at that.
Bro,
hey.
that's the thing with LAT, right? So I was expecting LAT to be like, like how, okay, when we were insane on S&D on that year when we won champs, right? And we were changing shit up every team.
Oh
we
yeah,
playing,
all the
right?
Yeah.
I was surprised. I thought this year LAT would do that. But they played the same breakoffs and strats against everyone. So against Boston, they did literally the same shit that they did against FaZe in the grand finals. And Boston were hard countering them. They didn't even change anything up.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what the fuck? At least change one position or one break.
That's why. That's what. Yeah. That's why it's hard. Like if you don't prep and like you don't come up with new strats that you want to just throw in randomly in matches, and you're doing the same things, like it makes it harder to switch it up in the moment because you're like, fuck, we didn't talk about switching it up. Like you could do it, and I feel like that's like what the best S&D teams do is like they adapt fast and they just like change it. But sometimes it is hard in the moment to be like, yo, which is random.
What happened to them? I'm not gonna lie. This is just my opinion. And I'm just going to be totally blunt. I actually think they got complacent. I'm just going to be honest. And that could obviously not be the case. That could obviously be, I know nothing. This is just from the outside looking in. Don't think anything deep of it. Don't think anything deep of it. From the outside looking in, it just seemed like they were complacent. No bullshit. Playing against them, it didn't really seem like they were, I don't know. It seems like whenever they're playing against us, they're just playing through the motions.
Yo, Damon, JP, Huke comms really have stepped up, huh? In the listings.
Bro, 100%.
Bro,
that dude's our
comms
best
are
commer.
insane.
Well, was that a product of a conversation you had with him, or is that just like something that he wanted to do, like improve that aspect of his game?
He just did it.
He straight up just did it.
That's typical then. If you guys
Nah, dude, I
asked that of him.
I will say this, bro. I
we
said on the
knew we
stream,
had
too.
shit comms though for like.
Oh yeah, but he was so devoted. Like there's no, I don't think anyone in the league put more time in playing and actually watching than he did. I would be very surprised if there's
That
more
doesn't surprise
or
me
someone
at
with
all.
more.
That doesn't surprise me.
That
at all,
dude
though.
fucking lives this shit.
Yeah, I mean, bro, even if
So this theory of teams getting complacent, I mean, it's definitely a real thing. The question is, which teams does it happen to? Which teams are more viable to make it happen? And it's, it's difficult. If I'm Nadeshot, it's difficult to hear this from Shotzzy, that he believes that from his time in scrims against the Thieves, and from what he saw from them, and the level that they played before, the level that they played at Champs, that they simply believed that they would be fine, even if their practice wasn't going so well, and they were simply not putting in the time that the other teams were to maintain their time at the top. I mean, it's interesting. Everyone knows that it's easier to get to the top than it is to stay there. But it doesn't seem like Thieves were putting in the effort that justified anything other than the result that they actually got at the World Championship. And this is going to be, difficult for Nadeshot to take because, the team on paper is spectacularly good. It's difficult to make it much better in theory. They were the best team in the game by a margin for a good chunk of time. And then at the World Championship, it was a very different story. And he's now hearing from the eventual, Shotzzy wasn't the tournament MVP, but he was certainly the finals MVP and won the entire thing. Now it's got 3 rings. Shotzi's effectively telling them, they were not mentally prepared as they should have been for this tournament for all the money that Nadeshot put in and now he's spending on CS cases. It could have been a very different story had Thieves had a different approach, but they didn't, and why they didn't is a very interesting question. That clip as well of Daryl talking about how they turned up to the World Championship and they ran exactly the same search and destroy strats on Red Card Search than they had against FaZe, and Boston knew exactly what they were going to do, hard countered them bad, and Neslo'd them in the series. It's like that type of stuff is pretty unacceptable when it comes to preparation for the biggest tournament of the year, and it raises questions as to not exactly whether that Thieves team is salvageable, because obviously they are. They've won 2 events, they've had a great season, they were number 1 in the CDL standings. But, they had a great season until the big one when it really mattered, and that's when things drastically fell apart, and they looked nowhere near where they needed to be. Getting bopped out 3-0 by Surge was not a good sign at all to lose the tournament, especially because, Surge went on to make the grand finals, but it's not like they won the whole thing in emphatic fashion. So lots maybe for that team to learn if they do stick the same going into the World Cup and the World Championship next year, but of course for the World Cup, the pressure is going to be on to perform, otherwise that team might need to do something. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Paco, you won enough. Like, just this year, you're going to let Dashy get a charity second ring, and then we win it again next year, Yeah, I mean, now that Dashy's got 2, like, you guys are both, like, the Valorant and Counter-Strike alphas. Like, who's going to get the 3rd first? You know what I'm saying? I think it's going to be you, Paco. No disrespect, Dashy.
Yo, Paco, he's free firing you when he's like.
I don't have a second ring, Nate. Dude.
Wait, what?
Oh my god.
Nah, wait, you fucking
Yeah, bro. Brandon took the other one too.
Oh no, Paco. That was the
almost there.
that
I
was the one
almost
that
there, dude.
that was
Last
the one
year,
Paco was
almost.
like. Yeah, he says he gave to me, but he dropped 18 in the S&D. So I don't know. Like maybe he waited the whole year to. Maybe he waited the whole year to give me the ring, but then he just dropped the S&D record that year. It's no problem though.